Good morning, happy Friday. Thank you for joining me here in the Rockfish Kitchen. We're gonna do some cooking today. On Fridays, I want to be able to head out to the garden with you, grab garden goodies, and bring them into the kitchen and show you what to do with them. It is January and there is not a whole lot going on out there, but there is a little bit. So we are making a bacon and herb wrapped pork tenderloin and some Parmesan crusted potatoes, and from the garden last year I have some frozen green beans, and I'll show you my favorite way to make fresh green beans so they're not quite like a fresh green bean. I'm not a huge fan of fresh green beans, so I'll show you my way of doing this. So let's head out to the garden and we will gather our stuff. I need to get some eggs while I'm out there too. Okay, we've got our goodies, and there's a little bit more out there than I thought, which will be the perfect herbs for this meal. So I grabbed some thyme and some sage. Oh, this wasn't completely taken out by the cold. Some sage, and there was a tiny little bit of oregano out there, so I grabbed that, and some rosemary, which is perfect with pork. I also got my eggs. We're just gonna put those to the side. We'll save those for another recipe another day. So the first thing we're going to do is actually get started on these potatoes because they're gonna take a little bit longer to cook, I think. So I've got just some russet potatoes or some yellow potatoes, whichever ones you wanna use. Don't use the baby potatoes because of the way we're gonna cut this, we want a little bit bigger than like a baby potato. So I am just going to cut it, and I'll show you here in just a second. I'm gonna cut it almost all the way through into like these little slivers, but I want it to stay so it's kind of like an accordion. Okay, so you can see we've kind of sliced through almost all of it, all right? We're just gonna lay these in the bottom of a cast iron pan. I'm gonna get these chopped and then we'll move on. All right, next thing we're gonna do, we've got our potatoes all spread out here, is I'm going to kind of drench them in some melted butter. I did a half stick, so I've got like 9 potatoes here. I've got about half stick of melted butter, and I'm going to just put it over the top, but I want it to fall down into those little crevices. So as I'm doing this, I just wanna kind of separate a little bit and get some of that down in there. Today is kind of a crazy day. I've got the farrier coming later today for the horses. I've got some gravel coming for down at the barn and the stalls. So hopefully I can get this done and prepped before all that happens. So I'm just going to take a little bit of what's left in here and just kind of really drench them. Okay, some salt and pepper. I'm actually gonna do some herb salt, and this I will share with you once we get into the garden season, because this is one of the best ways to preserve your herbs, and it's so simple and easy. Of course, we always have an abundance of herbs, at least I do, and I don't want any to go to waste, especially ones that die back in the fall. So I turn it into an herb salt and I use it all winter long, and it is wonderful. Obviously, if you don't have this, you can do some salt and maybe a little bit of Italian seasoning, Or you can chop up some of these fresh herbs that we're getting ready to use for the pork and use it on your potatoes as well. Pepper. My daughter had to stir something too. She sees me cooking and she needed her stuff. I've got some freshly grated Parmesan cheese and I'm just gonna top each one. Again, trying to make it go down into at least some of those little crevices. Cheese and butter and herbs, what else could make this thing better? Okay, we're going in an oven at 400 degrees, probably about, I'm thinking 40 minutes. I'll update you when it comes out. I'm thinking it's gonna be about 40 minutes here. So let's get these going. Okay, for our pork, we are going to slice it long ways, almost all the way through, kind of like we did our potatoes. And we're gonna lay this thing out flat. I miss having our own pigs. We raised pigs for several years and we just have not done it since the pandemic. And we also had a baby during that time, so it kind of got a little overwhelming, but we are missing them and we want them back because the pork chops were so good. I mean, they like melted in your mouth like butter. So I've got some wax paper. You could also use a baggie or a bag or saran wrap. I'm laying one of the pork tenderloins in between here, and this is where we get to take out some of our aggression, and I hope my wooden spoon works here. So we're gonna beat this thing until it is flat, and then we're gonna add our seasonings. Okay, yeah, that was nice. I got to let out a lot of anger, a lot of stress. Like this child's been yelling at me all morning and I don't know what she wants. She's only 2, so she wants everything and can't fully communicate, so. Okay, let's make up our butter mixture and herbs for our pork tenderloins here. So I have a stick of salted, softened butter. I'm gonna put it into a bowl. I'm going to add a little bit of garlic. I did not have any ready, obviously, in the garden. So I'm just gonna use a little bit of this jar, probably a clove or 2. You can kind of gauge it on what you like. I love garlic, but I hate smelling like it. So I probably used about a clove. Okay, then we're gonna do some salt and pepper. And this can be, again, to taste. I'm probably doing half a teaspoon of pepper. And then I'm gonna do just a little bit of my herb salt just to add a little extra herbiness. Probably about a teaspoon of salt. Remember, we're doing up 2 big pieces of meat here. Okay, so then I'm gonna grab my other cutting board since I used the meat for that one. And we're gonna grab some of our herbs. So I'm gonna start with the rosemary and we're gonna strip it. So you hold the top of it and then you pull, oops, okay. You hold the top of it and then you pull backwards and it'll strip the leaves. Okay. And then I just kind of take off the tops to add that. And I want this to be very flavorful and herby, so we're gonna do a lot of rosemary. You can use whatever herbs you have in the garden. I mean, any variety, or if you find at the grocery store, you could do some parsley, oregano. All right, so I've got just a small handful of make sure I'm using my right knife here, the rosemary, and I'm just gonna give it a quick chop. I changed my mind because I hate this cutting board. So I'm gonna put my rosemary into my chopper, some sage leaves, and I'm gonna try to go through and pick out the ones that haven't really been nipped by the cold. All right, I did probably like 6 leaves of sage, and then I'm gonna grab the thyme. I'm gonna strip this the same way that I did with the rosemary. You just hold the tip and pull backwards. All right, I did probably almost a tablespoon or so of the thyme leaves. Then I'm just going to get this chopped. I can smell our potatoes and they smell so good. All right, we've chopped pretty fine here. You can do as fine or as big of chunks as you want. It really doesn't matter. All right, we're gonna put all of that into our bowl and we're gonna smush it together and let this butter take on all those flavors of those herbs. Okay, make sure it's well incorporated into that butter so it all gets spread out nice and evenly. So I'm going to, because I have 2 pork tenderloins, I want half of this mixture on the inside and then some of it on the outside when I go to roll it up. So I'm gonna split this mixture into about 4 sections, and I'm gonna use 1/4 of it on the inside of this one, and I'm just going to spread it all over this pork tenderloin. All right, so now we're gonna start on our long ends and we're just gonna roll it up. Okay, now for our bacon, I'm just gonna use up this pack that we've had open, but you probably want maybe 4 to 5 pieces per pork tenderloin. We're gonna start and we're gonna start wrapping it. I'm actually gonna go ahead and put it in my pan. I've got a cast iron baking dish here. I'll show you that in just a second. I know it's off the screen right now. Okay, last step is to take the rest of your butter mixture and herb mixture, and we are just gonna spread it right over the top. This is now going into a 375-degree preheated oven. We are gonna cook it to about 160, 165. I know some people like their pork at 140. It is your preference. I personally like mine well done. So we're gonna put it in the oven and then we'll get started on our green beans. Green beans from last year's garden. So this is literally how I store them. I pull them in from the garden. I don't snap them. I don't do anything with them. I stick them into a freezer bag and I put them in my freezer. That's it. That's it. These are the Desperado bush beans. I think they're from Burpee is where I get them. This was my 2nd or 3rd year growing this variety in our garden, and they did amazing. So they're a bush bean, not a vining bean. I plant them 9 beans per square foot. I mean, I can jam pack. I mean, these plants themselves pack a lot of green beans. So they're my favorite variety and they're like my top vegetable that I would grow every single year in that variety. So these are still frozen. I pull them right out, kind of line them up here. Just a few at a time. This might be too many. And then I line up the edges and I cut off the ends. So I am gonna go do this, and if they're long, I will cut them in half at this point too. I'm just gonna go through and do this to a handful or a couple handfuls. Remember, they cook down, so we're gonna cook these down so they're not like a fresh, crispy green bean. I'm not personally a huge fan of that. If you like it that way, just don't cook them as long as I am going to show you today. You can still do the same things. We're gonna use the same type ingredients that we've been using. Our butter. Today is a day full of butter recipes, which is okay. I feel like Paula Deen with the amount of butter I use today. So, but sometimes it's just worth it. And we want that flavor in there. So let me go through and get these all chopped. Okay, we are about ready to head over to the stove. You know, a lot of what gardening and cooking from the garden is you know, learning different ways to utilize the same ingredients over and over in a different way maybe, or eating seasonally or from what you have preserved or just thrown into the freezer. So yes, I know there's lots of herbs in this, but the most herby thing today is going to be our pork. and it's gonna take on such great flavor with that garlic. You know, when the garden's producing in the summer and there's lots to bring in and have to take care of, whether that's freezing, blanching. You know, obviously I don't blanch these green beans and I don't cut them, I don't even wash them, I just stick them in the bag and you know, they're perfectly fine. I mean, I can still smell like they just came straight from the garden. All right, here we go. Let's go over to the stove. Okay, we are going to get our cast iron pan on the stove on medium-high heat. We're gonna put in a little bit more butter. Sorry, we are. Okay, so maybe like tablespoon and a half. And usually I do some olive oil. I'm actually out of olive oil and I didn't even realize it. Okay, this is not a cooking show, this is just my real life. So today I'm gonna use just a little bit of vegetable oil. Just a little bit, but definitely use olive oil. I just do a little turn around the pan, maybe like a tablespoon, a little bit more than a tablespoon or so. And I'm going to do a splash, just a splash of balsamic vinegar. You can leave this out if you want to. I think it just gives a little extra flavor. All right, we're gonna toss in our green beans. I'm gonna stir and get them coated in that oil and butter. So with these being frozen, I mean, I took them straight frozen into the pan. They're gonna give a little bit of moisture to help cook them down a little bit. You can also add a little bit of garlic if you want to, because I don't want to smell and reek like garlic. I've put some in that pork. I'm gonna leave it out of my green beans, but I am gonna add some more of my herb salt. So the herb salt, you know, is not like super powerful, packed, flavorful of herbs. So you can just use regular salt. I'm using a coarse salt, and then I'm gonna use some pepper just to taste. And then one thing I like to put, if you like a little bit of spice, I like just a little bit, is a little splash of cayenne pepper. You can leave this out if you want to, but it does add really good flavor to it, and just a little bit of heat. Like my kids will still eat it. All right, I'm gonna let that cook down. I'm gonna check on our other stuff, and we'll come back to this in just a second. So this is the point where you get to decide when you want to take these things off. So right now, they're still gonna be like a fresh green bean. They've only been on here for a few minutes, but all of the, you know, frozen is cooked off of them, and they're just kind of nice and tender. I'm gonna keep them going because I like that canned green bean feel. I'm gonna let them just go, and then at the end, I crank up the heat and kind of caramelize them a little bit. All right, I'm still going. So I put them on low now. All the water is cooked out of them, you can see. So they're just continuing to get soft. And I'm just gonna let these things hang out on low until our pork and potatoes are done. Everything just came out of the oven, and I'm gonna come sit in the sunshine for a minute while it cools off just a little bit, but my daughter is now asleep, so I wanted to come out here. We'll go in, load up a plate, and come back out here and try a bite of this. But I did want to say everything took right about an hour. The potatoes an hour, the pork roughly about an hour. The last few minutes of the pork, I cranked the heat up to broil and wanted that bacon to really crisp up. So I will head in and we'll get a plate fixed up and we'll try everything. I can't believe I am out here on my porch in January. It's incredible. Oh, look at this. It smells so good. I'm gonna lose it. This pork is so pretty with those herbs inside. I just can't wait to take a bite. These potatoes, that Parmesan cheese, it just like makes this crust on the top and then gets down into the center. We just need to try them. The saltiness and the crisp of that Parmesan cheese just makes it so good. Now these green beans, remember I said, you can, you know, cook them down as far as you want to. So I do mine sometimes even farther than this. I just like them to be soft, almost like a canned green bean. I don't want any crunch left in them. Pork, I'm grabbing some of that bacon with it. Tons of flavor. Tons of flavor. And the green beans. I should have cut them a little bit more. They're still a little crispy, but they're good. Thank you all for joining me today. I'm excited to cook with you some more from the garden. We're gonna have to plant the garden first before we do a whole lot more cooking. There's not a lot left out there. Thank you all for watching. We will see you next time.